Welcome back to On the Light. In today's episode, I have the pleasure to be speaking with James Murphy. James began practicing Iyengar Yoga in 1988 and was a founding member of the Iyengar Yoga Institute of New York in 1992. He studied extensively in India with B.K.S. Iyengar, Geeta, and Prashant, making over 25 trips. A former professional dancer, James trained under Mary Dunn and assisted her until her passing. James teaches a wide range of classes at the Institute from Level 1 to Level 4, specific needs, and a free weekly class for the LGBTQ community. He also mentors teachers through the Institute's teacher education program. This was such a fun episode for me to record. I enjoyed James's positive outlook. He's very humble and sweet and personable. I hope you enjoy this as much as I did. Please enjoy this episode of On the Light. Hi, James. Thanks for meeting with me and doing this interview.
We'll see how it goes.
Well, the first thing I always like to ask people, just to give some context, is what was your initial introduction to Iyengar Yoga? Did you have other types of yoga before, or?
My first introduction to Iyengar Yoga, which I didn't know at the time it was Iyengar Yoga, was when I was in the dance company.
Okay.
And we were in Hawaii, and one of the girls in the company was from California, and she would be doing something off to the side, and she'd be staying in a trikonasana or something, which I didn't know even what it was. But we were all warming up for the show, and she'd be standing there. I thought, my God, this girl from California, she's just staying still over there. How is she going to get ready for the performance? Because we're all moving around and warming up and doing things. And she was over there, standing there. And I thought, oh God, these girls from California, what are they doing? It just seemed like, what is that? I mean, and then oh, it's yoga. I thought, oh gosh, yoga. So then she when we were in Hawaii traveling and touring, we had a day off, and she said, "Oh, there's this person teaching yoga. We should go take it." So the whole company, or most of the company, we filed in and went to this yoga class, which was was Glenn Kawana was teaching it, and so the whole New York dance company, landed him, and he later on when I met him, I didn't know who he was, so we just took the class and then left, and and it was I was being taught Iyengar Yoga. He said, "Oh God." He was so nervous. This whole, New York dance company came in, and there he was teaching us. So we talked about that later. It was just funny. But so that was my introduction, but I didn't know what it was. I just was doing something that seemed like it was staying still, and not doing much. And then later on, I realized how much was going on when you're taking a class, or when you looks like you're staying still from outside, but inside there's lots of things going on. And so then when I was in New York, so I was teaching this other kind of yoga, which wasn't really yoga. It was a mixture of dance and some kind of breathing exercises and some kind of martial art thing. And so they put it together and they called it yoga. And someone said, "Oh, you should take a class with Kevin Gardner and Mary Dunn." And so then I went to Kevin's class in his home, and he had the ropes. And I thought, "Oh, this is fun." And we were swinging on the ropes, and I thought, this is amazing. And then I met Mary, and at first I was a little, I looked around the room, and I thought, I don't know if these people are and there's a lot of older women, and a lot of very different than the kind of yoga that I was doing, which was on a carpet with mirrors and someone playing a piano, and there was a wave machine in the background. And suddenly Mary was like, "Come on, stand up and put full on balance," and all these, it was like a cheerleader. So it was a whole different idea of what yoga was. But people had questions and they got answers, and it was tangible. Where what I was doing, someone said, "I don't, what do you do?" And then there was these answers like, "Well, the Kundalini is off. Your chakras aren't lined up right." So that really didn't help me understand what was going on. But with Mary, someone had a neck problem or something, and then she gave things that could help it. And someone didn't understand something, she taught ways to be able to do what the person was having trouble doing. So, and she was fun, and it was laughter, and it was light. And so I just once I took class with her, then that was it. So my introduction was kind of, I remember thinking, well, I'm not quite sure about this. And then there was this, they had just come back from Pune, that
Mm-hmm.
first group, and they were showing, there was a flyer that said, "Oh, come watch the 1938 practice tape." And so it was in this office, and they were showing the video, and I peeked into the room, and I looked, and I thought, well, I'm not going to actually go in. I'll just watch it from the doorway because I wasn't sure about these people. They were
Yeah.
older. I was a young dancer, and I, was checking it out. But then I saw this 1938 practice tape, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. I want to do that. I want to be how do you do that? It was silent, and it was really interesting. And they were talking about just coming back from India. I thought, well, India, I've never been to India. I'd like to go to India. And so I asked, like, how do you get to go? And they, you have to write a letter, and it will take about 3 years. So I wrote a letter. That was in 1989, and then I got into uh, the class in 1992. So I had to wait, and then in that waiting period, I started taking classes with Mary and Kevin regularly, and so I was more prepared when I got there
Mm-hmm.
than I would have been if I went right in 1989. So it was really good that I had that time to really to have those 3 years to understand what a little bit what was going on. Even though I first got there, I looked at my notes for my first class in that I took in Pune, and it just says day one. What can I remember? It was a whirlwind of intensity, chaos, and lots of backbends, and that's all I can remember. That's right, I wrote down. So it was a lot to take in that first class. I remember thinking,
How
wow.
old were you when you first, how old, you must have been pretty young still.
I was I was in the dance company for 10 years. I got in the dance company when I was 19, and I was like till 29. And so it was like 20, I was like 29, 27. I
Okay.
went to India first with the dance company, actually. And so I met Mr. Iyengar in 1990. Mary gave me a letter. I was going to India with the dance company, and I had a day off. So I took the Deccan Queen down to Pune, and I gave Pandu the letter, I gave Pandu said I have a letter from Mr. Iyengar, and he took me down to the library, and I gave the letter to Mr. Iyengar, and he read it, and I just sat there, and he was talking to somebody else, some musician, and we talked, and it was all fine, and then I met him. I took a little tour of the institute, and then got back on the train and went back to Mumbai. Um,
Okay.
and I thought, well, people say he's so fierce and tense. He seems so nice to me. Of
Mhm.
course, that was very different when he was in the library than when I went back and finally studied with him. I saw a whole other uh, idea of him when he's in the classroom. You have to be on your toes.
So were you still dancing when you at that point? Like, was there a time where you were both practicing yoga and in the dance company?
Not really. I mean, yes, I was I was practicing yoga, but it wasn't. I didn't kind of give over to it fully. I was taking classes with Mary and everything, and I was
Yeah.
still dancing, but I was kind of leaving and then coming back to even the dance company. Somebody would have an injury, and I would step back for a couple performances, or I
Right.
did a tour for. I did the tour in India. I kind of had left, but then I came back.
Hmm.
Um, I'd fill in for someone because the company was also switching. It had been five. No, sorry, it was 5 men, 5 women. There was 10 of us in the Nikolai Dance Company, but the Murray Lewis Company also had 8 people, and so they were starting to merge together. So people would leave, and they kind of came together because Murray and Nick were kind of also combining their companies. They was switching over. Then Nick died, and it became one thing. So I didn't want to dance with them anymore after Nick died, the company that I danced with, and so everything was kind of transitioning for them as well. And so I was in transition, and uh, and actually I also learned Iyengar yoga from when I first went to Indonesia, to Bali. I went on a trip to left the dance company, thought, what am I going to do next? I went to the other side of the world, went to Bali. I was on a yoga trip. I didn't know it was Iyengar yoga either. Ann Barrows was teaching it, and so I took some classes, but it wasn't really brought out that it was Iyengar yoga. It was just yoga. And then I was just doing whatever they said to do. So it really didn't make sense to me until with Mary and Kevin that this is a method, and this is its own thing, and there's a guru, and then he teaches, and you go and study with him. That's where it kind of made all sense to me.
Hmm. So what was that first experience like when you went to the institute to study?
In Pune.
Yeah.
It was, well, I was very fortunate because when Mary came back from that group, which was I think 89, that was the last intensive. So they
Hmm.
had no more American intensives. And so she thought, oh, I really should be there for the intensive. And so there was somehow, uh, I guess it was a Canadian intensive that was happening. And Mary was given two spots. So because that there was two extra spots that you could use in the Canadian intensive. And so myself and Elizabeth Wally, which I think was her college roommate, and so the two of us took the intensive, is my memory. And so I went into an intensive with Geeta and Guruji teaching, and then I stayed for general classes after for a month.
Oh,
And then I was supposed to go to hike. I know to go to Nepal and go do something, but there was an Air India strike, so my plane was canceled. And so I thought, well, I'll just wait another week or two, and then then it just changed, and I stayed for another month, and I stayed for another month. So I ended up staying for almost 4 months that first trip, and
wow.
and it was Mr. Iyengar's birthday, and
Yeah.
so there was this, and MTV had just come to India, and so there was this. They said, well, instead of MTV, we should give him YTV, Yoga TV. So like there was this whole big skit that we did, and we gave him a big remote control, a styrofoam remote control that Parvez carved, and then we put all these skits together like a TV show about about Iyengar Yoga, and there was this little thing about pranayama that we were joking around with Geeta and Prashant had done, and there was another. We did a little rap song that we
Oh
did.
my gosh.
Um, yeah, uh, it started with he's gotten. Let's see. I hear there's a man named B.K.S. He's world renowned because he's the best. His poses are alive from his head to his toes. You wouldn't believe that he's 70 years old, or no, whatever it was.
Oh my God.
He's gotten a lot of rap for giving folks a slap, but yoga is not about taking a nap. Geeta and Prashant are his children, you see. They teach lots of classes. That's the way it should be. In their classes, they have to shout in order to get the message out. And then there was this little chorus: twist, turn, rotate, stay, inhale, exhale, meditate, pray. And so we did that. And every night I'd come up with um, a different, thing. And so that I would just sit there and write it down. I never had done it before and never did it after, but somehow I just got this rhythm going, and I kept writing
Uh-huh.
down different courses. I'm gonna try to pull it back together because I found it in my notes. I'm gonna
I
find.
love that.
We're gonna put it together for when Abby comes to Philadelphia. We'll do
Oh,
like a newer, updated version, because it's been a while. But
yes.
we'll put something together of that together because we'll be in Philadelphia, city of brotherly love. Yeah, so we're gonna do. I hope to do something fun like that.
Oh,
I
wow.
got
That's
really involved with the people. Zubin was there at that time, and Abe, and so I just kind of connected with that group, and we all had fun together, and he loved it and laughed, and so that's kind of where I kind of made a connection with Pune and the Iyengars was that first trip at the end when we were getting all of those things ready for the birthday celebration at that time.
uh-huh. Uh-huh. Was that any of that recorded?
I don't think I don't think it was.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I think there might be some pictures. I mean, at the very end of it, then we had shirts on that had Guruji spelled, each letter was on our back, but we did the whole thing to the front, and then at the end, we went down Guruji Guruji is that we
Uh-huh.
spelled in dog pose. So
Right. Oh my gosh.
yeah, so it was it was fun. It was lots of fun. Very theatrical. And then I mean, the similar thing happened when he came to New York
Yep.
years later when we did Light on Life his tour, and then we
Hmm.
did a demonstration at City Center, and
Hmm.
that was another big fun thing that we put on.
Yeah. Was it the same or more elaborate than what you did in Estes Park?
Um, Estes Park was a piece of it or parts of it. Actually, I was talking to him. We all have different memories of how things were.
Yeah, yeah.
And we just did our 20th anniversary of our yogathon, and some people say, "Oh, the first yogathon, I remember exactly this happening." And then we looked at the pictures, but it wasn't that yogathon. or something.
Right.
So then we go, oh, I thought it was that. No, oh no, that was happened. So they kind of, after 20 years of doing things like this, you kind of, your memories get blurred about what happened. But my memory is that Estes Park happened, and we had pieces of that in it at
Uh-huh.
Estes Park, but we had a whole different full version of it in New York, which had lights and music, and I think we just did a few excerpts of it from it for Estes Park.
Okay.
And I think, because my memory is which one happened first. We went to Estes Park and then he came to New York, or did he came to New York and then we went to this park? And that's what I can't quite put
I
together.
think it was Estes Park was first because I remember seeing it, and then we came home and my teacher Kristen told me that she gave Lee the gift to go out and see it in New York. So I'm pretty sure that followed that.
Yeah, I think so too. So what we did is we didn't want to do the whole thing, and we couldn't do the whole thing the way it was needed to be done. So we
Mhm.
did a few pieces of it to kind of practice and get it going. But then when we had New York, we just had it was a whole different
Mhm.
thing.
And my memory of in Estes Park was that Guruji just loved that
Yeah,
performance.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 He loved it, and when we got to New York, um, well, then there was this interview that he did with Mira Nair on on the stage that basically was about his interview, but we did each chapter of Light on Life had its own little uh,
Oh yeah.
section. So there was water, there was fire, there was we went through all the elements, and so
Yeah.
each section was for an element. And then there was a little intermission, and Guruji came up and uh, did an interview with Mira about the book. And then he led the whole audience of 3,000 people chanting Om, and he did a whole little, quieting down of how to get the senses to quiet and go inward. And so that was wonderful. And it was also wonderful for him to be on a stage because he was basically, he did the demonstrations in his day, and he loved doing that and loved the energy that he got from the audience in those demonstrations. So even though he wasn't demonstrating, Iyengar Yoga was being demonstrated, and then he got to come up on stage and do that. And that was wonderful. And when he came up, I was supposed to garland him, and I went to garland him, and then he kind of hugged me, and I got stuck with the garland, and he said, "Good job, Murphy, good job." And then I thought I couldn't kind of get out, and then that didn't work out. And then afterwards, his his grandson said, "Oh, you don't understand. He doesn't even hug his family often. So
Right.
that was a big deal. He hugged you in front of 3,000 people. So that
Yeah.
was it was a wonderful evening and very uplifting. And we pulled it all together to make it happen because he was coming. And it was a once in a lifetime type thing that happened. Of course, he kept saying, um, "You have to do that more. You have to take this around the world. The whole world needs to see this." But it was one of those things. Well, we can't put that together and take it around the world because we pulled together to make it happen, but it was all volunteers and people came out to make it happen. But to put that on as a real show and produce it and make it happen, it wouldn't be possible. And it was
Yeah.
all we pulled it together because he was there. It made
Right.
his energy made us do it the best we could. But it would be
Mhm.
different to kind of keep that going for a world tour. But he kept every time I saw him afterwards, he kept saying that has to be going. You have to take that around the world. You have to take that. The world needs to see that because it was what a lot of times when you do a demonstration, either it can get kind of dry just going through the poses,
Yeah.
or it's kind of gets a little bit off and it's not really yoga, it's more dance or something because it's moving and everything. But this we try to make it as much as stick to Iyengar yoga as possible and make it something that you could uh, enjoy seeing because there was movement and music, and which wouldn't be normally what we do, but we made it so that it could fit together and kind of be educational with the elements as well as um, all these amazing poses that you can do, some of them moving, some of them staying still, and how that all goes together.
Yeah. I just remember the choreography of it was really impressive. Was that mostly you that did the choreography of it?
For the most part, it was me and then Kevin and Carrie. We all and different people pitched in to do different things. Mary
Mhm.
Mays, would rehearse us to make sure that we were all doing it correctly, the
Mhm.
standing poses, and to get it all to be right and have it all synchronized with music was a lot. But
Yeah.
yes, it was basically. is my ideas of how to put it all together for in with those different elements, how those could work.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. So it seems like you and Guruji had a pretty close relationship. Was that?
So in some ways, I I always felt that I was new, and so I felt there was this whole other group that was ahead of me that deserved to be close to him, and so I would always I kind of was shy, I think, in a way, and pulled off to the side, and so I even though we had this connection, I mean I think he appreciated me, I appreciated him, but I felt like, oh, he's my teacher's teacher,
Yeah.
and so he's Mary's teacher. He's there was all those other senior teachers. They were they were the ones that were around him, and I was that next generation. So I felt like I shouldn't be so close. I mean, I was, but I wasn't. I would hold back because I went through Mary, and then Fike was also who I studied with. Those are the my two teachers that I felt at the time
Mhm,
that I studied with that were not at the institute. And then I would go to Pune. So after that intensive I had with Geeta and Guruji, then I took Prashant's classes, and
mhm,
that's where I really felt that I was connected was much more with Prashant's teaching, only because I did it more regularly. I had Geeta maybe twice a week or once a week, and then I would watch the other classes. But I was taking Prashant's classes 4 or 5 times a week, it
mhm,
seemed. And so I had more of his influence. And then I was assisting or being around for Geeta's classes because when I was there, I would either watch the class or I'd take the class, and or assisting or participating and helping whenever needed in the medical classes or so I was there all the time, but I kind of would keep my distance. I think from Guruji because I felt other people were more deserving or they should be there or help him. But I also was around, but I was a little bit more shy. Although sometimes then he'd say, "Well, no, we're going to Mumbai to this." There was a Parkinson's thing that he was doing in a hospital, and so he said, "You should come." And so then all of a sudden I was in the back of the car driving with
mhm.
him to Mumbai to some event, and it was amazing to watch and be
Yeah.
there. And so, or there was a picnic in Mumbai that somebody that the Birju and those people from Mumbai were having, and I went to the class, and then I went out to the picnic with them, and again I just stayed off to the side and was quiet and just listened. So I didn't
Mhm,
really put myself too close somehow.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
but I felt more connected. I mean, with Geeta and Guru and Prashant, those were the people that I was really learning from. And then he'd be practicing off the side and saying things, and I would, be around. But I didn't feel like he was really my teacher, even though he was the teacher. He was the person I felt that he had given that to other people that I was going to be able to digest it better. And for me, it was just watching him and
mhm,
watching him practice and seeing how he connected with people and what things he gave certain people, what things he gave other people, and what he'd say to one person, what he'd say to another person, and how he was psychologically working with people differently. Like when he was in the medical class and he was working with this child, he'd be one way, and then with this older patient that he'd been known for a long time, he'd be another way. And then when he was in Mumbai teaching, which was like an old family, he was very it was just wonderful and gentle and like very relaxed. Um,
mhm,
so there was all these different ways that he taught depending
mhm,
on the situation that he was in, and so it was just to see all that and realize that it was a vast uh, way of looking at it. There wasn't just one way that he was. There was all these different ways that he became depending on the situation that was ahead in front of him.
mhm. He was really amazing that way, very adaptable and
I mean, and that's the thing. I think that from seeing how that his thing was mainly just don't get stuck in one way,
mhm,
and don't and so he was constantly learning and constantly changing it up so that you had to also not get stuck in the way it was the day before. Like if you come in, you do practice something that you thought you learned the day before, and he said, "What is why are you doing that? That was yesterday. Be here today." And so then he give you something new to look at. So he was bringing constantly fresh, new ways of and perspectives of how to look at poses or how to look at teaching. And so, and I think that's what kept him so young in some ways. He kept going because he was constantly looking at things freshly and not getting stuck in a habit or old ways of doing things. And so that's what like excited him, I think, and that's what it was. He was able to keep coming up with new things to give people, and it was just interesting all the time. So it didn't get at all boring, that's for sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Prashant definitely teaches us that too, to
Yeah,
constantly be playful with it and yeah, try things different ways.
Prashant just takes us way into other zones of and realities. I mean, you go from very tangible things to this, to space and to the internal parts of the earth, and it's just amazing how he's never really left Puno, the institute, and he
I know.
basically is this little room, and it's like the knowledge that comes out, and it's just so vast. I think that's what it's sometimes some ways I feel like I get so I'm even more shy around him or something because I think what there's nothing I can possibly ask because he gives so much. There's not a question that I have because if I don't understand it, I need time to understand it because there's so much that I haven't figured out yet, and so
I
I
feel
just have to
the
keep
same way.
listening to it. It's
Yes.
not really it's so much there that to
Uh-huh.
unpack, and it just keeps coming up more and more. I feel like it's not even right for me to. I don't have a question because I haven't gotten yet the first, And I go back to my old notes and I think, oh, he was teaching so like there was so much strong physical work we were doing, and it still is, but it's kind of
Yeah.
you have to do that on your own now. Like that's your job. I'm gonna give you some other things to be thinking about because we got to move on, you know. And I'm gonna give you these other things to think about so you don't just are stuck in the one aspect of the teaching.
It's like he knows everything.
Yeah.
He's so worldly.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's amazing.
Worldly and outer worldly and
Yes. Yeah.
outer spacely. I mean, it's just like how he knows all the planets. He knows all the. I mean, he knows all the distances from each planet to another, and the miles of that. And it's like, how could you hold that into all that in your head? And it just comes out, and it comes out in all different ways. And I think, how would you store that? Where is that being stored? In some ways, he is like this everything that's out there is in there. He says, everything that's out there is inside you. So you don't have to go searching out for it because it's all there. So if all the universe is out there and all the universe is in there, he's got all the answers. He's found out how to tap that, and somehow he's tapped that knowledge.
Are there any like significant lessons or anything that really had an impact on you? I mean, I know everything does, so it's probably hard to pinpoint it down onto one or two lessons that you learned from Guruji, but is there anything that like a moment with him that kind of stands out with you?
That is hard, but I mean, I think the main thing is like just don't keep on learning.
Uh,
Keep on learning, and don't get stuck in holding on to something and being and as if that's it. He kept learning, and he kept wanting you to learn. So just don't stop learning. So if you whatever you were doing at the moment, usually it was not that it was wrong, but it was like, hey, that what about this? Have you tried this? And so he would always give you something that you weren't doing. So
mhm.
it might seem like, oh, what I'm doing is wrong, but it wasn't that it was wrong. It's just that, have you thought about this? It didn't always come across that way, but it was more like, try this, try this. So there was always new, fresh ways of looking at things. Once I was showing them pictures of some certification, and it was Shirshasana dropping back, and then so my thumb was kind of, and when I dropped back, my thumb kind of poked up, and he looked at me, and he looked at the picture, and he said, like, and he put his face, like, made this face, like, how could I possibly have made that mistake? And it was like my one thumb was up or something, and he looked at me like, oh, how could you? I was such like it pained him to see that I was having my thumb off to the side or something. So it was things like that. But then he like had this twinkle in his eye, or he'd like be strong with someone, and he'd look at me and then go kind of like, oh, So
Yeah.
he had this playfulness that was there. That was also it was strong sometimes, and sometimes it was very strong when you were around him that you felt like, oh, it's you have to be careful. but then and he'd turn around and have a little twinkle in his eye and say like, make a little joke about it. So I think a
Mhm.
lot of it was, not that it was theatrical, but there was something about it that that's what was part of his teaching. Be strong, come on, you have to do this. And it's like, it's okay, and let it be a little bit. The playfulness that he had as well. And it was in class and it was outside of class, but it was basically, he was strong and he was light and he was poetic and he had these other ways of looking at things. So I think if you were nervous around him, then it was not so good. So I just tried to be neutral. So if he had
Mhm.
me do something, I just thought, okay, I'm going to be neutral so that he can show what he's trying to show. If he's trying to show something, he wants to have people see it. So to see it, you have to not be already doing it, or else
Yeah.
you can't see the transformation. If yoga is to transform and you want to see how that is done, you had to be neutral, and then he'd say to do something, and then you did it, and so that you did it so that it could be seen. Um,
Mhm.
and that's what I think. So I think Mary had the same connection with him, Mary Dunn. I mean, she was new when she came to him, and she was in her, I think, 30s or something when she started, and she was just an empty canvas, and so he was able to show how a beginner works, and yet she stayed following instructions, and so he just gave the instructions and she did it, and then you could see how it could transform and what his teaching could give. And so I think that's kind of, they had that relationship in that same way where she was a neutral canvas, which then he could show something and see what an impact that made his teaching, and so it worked.
Mhm.
And if someone was already doing what they thought they should do, well, then that to him was ego because they were already doing it. So they
Mhm.
weren't being humble so that he could show his point, get his point across. If they were saying, I'll show the best thing. And so then you have to be a little bit less so that you can see what he was going to do.
Did you do much with him outside of the practice hall? Like, were you involved in any of the family meals or those types of things?
Not so much. I mean,
Mhm.
I did like I was like I went to a picnic once
Yeah.
in Mumbai, and and he'd be around, but there were people that were closer to him, and I'd kind of be off to the side and stay quiet and just listen because I wanted to hear what everyone else had to say, but I didn't have anything to say, so I would just be off to the side. And so I don't know or I didn't really get in there to always hear exactly what was being said because I felt like other people needed to get it first and
Mhm.
translate it to me or something.
Mhm.
So when it was available, I was there. Every convention that he ever came to and did, or anything that the Iyengars did, I was always there
Mhm.
when I could, and I pretty much did everything that every national convention or everything that I could attend, I attended. And I felt very fortunate to have Mary as my teacher, Mary
Mhm.
Dunn, because she brought his teaching in such a way that wasn't just, oh, well, this is what the guru said, so you have to do what the guru said. She brought the intelligence of his teaching, so it was educational in a way that was more open and vast. And I think that, you know, she was interested in life, and so Guruji was interested in life, and so by interested in life, then you can have something to teach. But if you just do yoga and only yoga, then there's not much else and get a little dry, and there's,
Yeah.
it's just technical stuff to do. But so you have to have this, you have to be excited about life, and then you bring that to the teaching, and then the teaching can also inform your life, but you have to have it be excited. And Mary would come in, she just read an article in the Science Times about something, then she'd bring that into the teaching, or she
Mhm.
just baked something, and she was talking about how in lasagna how you have to put the things down in layers, and then she would talk about that in layers, and when she's teaching, or she's talking
Mhm.
about now you have to slice from the front of the groin to the buttock bones. It's like when you slice a piece of pie and you want to get that crust, you slice all the way down to the bottom. Or so she
Yeah.
used metaphors that were tangible and common, and it wasn't kind of esoteric. She wasn't quoting the scripture or talking about what sutra it came from, but the philosophy was there because it was in her. And
Yeah.
I think the Iyengars, that's what they bring it in a way that was very tangible, and it wasn't just kind of saying in sutra this part of this.
Mhm.
It just came in through how she taught, and so it was spiritual and it was philosophy and it was all these different parts, but it came out because it came in through the teaching in a way that was common and tangible to everybody that was in the class. If you know how to make lasagna, then it would work. If you didn't know how to make lasagna, you're stuck. And so I felt very lucky to have her because she was so connected to him, I think, and through her mother who brought him to Ann Arbor Y, first, United States. So I felt it was like really coming down in all the right ways. And so I was getting, there was no place where it kind of veered off and, mixing it with anything else. It was like as pure as it could be from Guruji. And, and Fike in the same way. I'd go to the summers, I'd go to Fike and Lacon and when he came and did workshops. And so Mary and Fike were very different. I mean, they were very different, but I felt both ways that I related to both of them in a different way. And there was something that was really wonderful about studying with Fike that was very more disciplined, and Mary's more overflowing with all different ways of looking at things. And so it was a great combination for me to understand Guruji's work. And the same thing with Geeta and Prashant. People, they're very different, and they're very different, but yet it never seemed different. It never seemed like it wasn't Iyengar Yoga to me. People, this, someone's only physical, and Prashant's all about the breath. But then I'd be in class with Geeta that was about the pranayama, and it was the most amazing thing. And then my class with Prashant, which was most of the physical thing that I could do was sweating and dripping with sweat, doing backbend or something. They were both doing Iyengar Yoga to me, and so it never felt that any discrepancy.
Yeah.
You had to stay long enough to do that. If you're just there for 1 month, it was one thing, but until you stood there for the next month, you realize, those things that were last month now is the opposite of that, but it's still the same. It's just another way of looking at it. And I was fortunate because I think a lot of the senior teachers took those intensives, but they didn't take general classes. And so until the intensive stopped for the United States, then people started taking general classes. Before that, they only took those intensives with Guruji and Geeta. So Prashant's teaching wasn't really in there as much until you took classes, general classes that were being given. And so I think that changed the whole way of what was being absorbed, because those intensives were intense, and that's what it is, and that's only what it is, and that's you got to do it. So if they came back and taught that, but then when you did that, and then you went to other classes that looked at it from another perspective, you got, that's the way we looked at it. One of the examples of being in the present really was that first intensive that I took. We were doing Dvipada Vipradasa, Ekapada Vipradasano. And so we were on a chair with a belt and one leg up, and we had to share 3 people to a chair because there wasn't enough chairs. So 3 people to a chair, and a belt was underneath, and another belt was over there. And so you had to get in there and hold on to the belt and crawl yourself in. And I came out, and the person went in after me, and I was standing there, and Geeta said, the woman that was struggling to get the belt, and Geeta said, "Why are you just standing there? Can't you help her? Don't you see that she needs help?" And I go down to help her. Geeta turns and goes, and Guruji goes, "Why?" Says, "Why are you helping her? She'll never learn to do anything on her own if you help her." And I thought, of course, I couldn't say, "Well, she just told me." I thought, well, there it is, and it was like they planned it, because Geeta said, "Why aren't you helping her?" And I go to help her. He says, "Why are you helping her? She'll never learn on her own." And both were true. She needed help. I should help her. If I help her, she's never going to know how to do it on her own. And there were 2 things that said, just have to be in the present, and just what's right at one moment might be not right at the next moment, and just have to kind of go with it and accept it. And I think that was kind of a big deal lesson that I learned that first trip. Just be in whatever has to be done, take care of it at that moment, and not get stuck in the past and hold on to the past, because it might change the next second. But it was almost like I thought, did they plan that? Because it was the timing of it was just like amazing. She just turned and walked away, and he came in and said the next thing.
So you were around, it sounds like you went for many years. Did you continue to go every year after that first time?
Yeah, pretty much. Either I went to Pune, or they were coming. Either Geeta was coming to the United States to do a convention, or when Guruji came. So the years that they were here in the United States, I didn't go, but I think I was looking at my notes, I was there a lot. I, you know, so I would go pretty much every year, or some years I skipped. And then there's the 80th birthday. That was a big deal, and I got sick that trip. I thought I was never going to go back to India. I thought because it was everybody was getting sick, and they were just fall. It was the blankets, and people were out there with their arms. We had to hold up our arms forever, and people were dropping like flies. And I thought,
Mm,
oh, I'm not going to get sick. I'm not going to get sick. And then like 2 days before the end, there was this celebration. I remember getting all dressed up, and all of a sudden it hit me. It was like
mm,
this weird fever, and so I couldn't go. And I remember being all dressed, and then I just couldn't leave the house apartment. And then Mary came back, and then all of a sudden I was fine again, and then I wasn't fine, and then we had to go to the airport. I was good to go to the airport. I got to the airport, and I was going down again, and then
mm,
I got on the plane, and Mary called my parents. They picked me up at the airport. I got off in a wheelchair because I couldn't function at that point, and they took me right to the hospital. They did all these tests, and they couldn't find anything. It was just this terrible thing that was going around. It was like
yeah.
something, but it was a terrible fever and headache. My head was going to explode. It was in my chest. It was in my stomach. It was a mess. It
Mm-hmm.
took about 2 weeks to get over it, just being in my parents' home and going, not doing anything. But
Mm-hmm.
so I thought, oh, I'm never going to go back, because it was even the idea of Indian food. I couldn't. The idea of India, just it was too strong. That being sick like that really put something. I thought, but then of course that changed.
Yeah.
That was just 1 year, and then I was back. But I remember there was this thought that, oh, I can't do this anymore, because it was so strong, and other people were having the same thing, but everyone was going, people would go down and then they disappear, and then somebody else would go down and disappeared. So they were, I didn't realize I wasn't around the people that were sick, but I got sick, and then I was home. But I did go pretty much every year.
Yeah. So you were able to see kind of the arc of his practice. What did you notice about like how that changed over the years when you would see him in the hall?
you know it was a gradual thing that just happened. But so I don't know if it changed. He supported more, but he was just always practicing. And
Mhm.
so it was more active, I guess, at the beginning. But I wasn't maybe paying attention as much as I should have at the beginning, because I was,
Yeah.
and so I didn't kind of, until I saw, oh, then I was trying to find out, like, how is he doing that? How is he staying so long? And then what kind of supports he was using. And then in the medical classes, I wanted to be as quick as I could to like get whatever prop he said to get, because I'd be following him around, and then he say something, blah blah blah, blah, and I think I have to go. I go in the prop room thinking, what did he say? What did he really want? And because he'll just like the round thing, and he'll go make a shape with his hand. And so
Oh,
so I go in the prop room, like, what is that shape? What does that mean? And so I come back with 5 or 6. By the time I got back, somebody else had brought him anyway. So it was like, but I try to read what he was. I try to be ahead of him, what I could think that he might be needing for that thing that he was looking at.
yeah.
But it was almost always wrong. But I wanted to be. I was trying to be as quick as I could. I remember the first time I watched the medical classes, and there was this guy Johnny. He was an assistant. And he was Iranian, and he was like a ninja. Rudy would say something, he'd go flying, come back and get ready to do something, or he had to pick up somebody, or had to hold a weight, or do something, and whatever it was like, and
Yeah.
I thought it was just like, wow, I want to be like that. I want to be as fast as I can and be as efficient as I can. And so that kind of was almost a little game that I played with myself, is how efficient and fast and on and focused could I be while I was in that classroom for the
Mhm.
medical classes, because you had to be doing what he said to do, but you had to be also paying attention to the thing that you were doing before that, and then seeing where he was going to go next. And so you were in this little dance of trying to remember all these things. And then I'll say something like, "Now do that 2 more times on that for him, and then keep this guy for 5 more minutes or something." So you had to remember all these things and do all these things, and then see what he was going to do and try to think what he was going to do ahead of time, so you could be there with the next thing. So
Yeah.
it was like, to me, it was fun, because I try to push myself in these ways that were just in whatever that was. I don't know. I try to be as efficient and fast and focused as I could be, which was different than when I was practicing in a practice room,
Mhm.
or taking a class. It was different. then I was just paying attention to what was being said. But in the medical classes, you had to be. It was a super high alert state that you had to be because he was going around and there was people involved that were patients. So you had to be, it was a life or death, kind of, something was going on. You had to really be there. Where practice, class was just you. It was just
Yeah.
me. And so it was a little bit different feeling. If I did something wrong, it's affecting me. But if I did something wrong with a patient or the
Yeah.
student from medical class, that was another whole layer of responsibility I felt. But that was exciting. It was exciting to me because I wanted, and I don't know if you never knew in those days. In the beginning, you didn't know what the person's what their thing was. So you
Yeah.
just kind of saw how he adjusted people, or what he asked to do, or what he asked prop to get, but you didn't know if the person was a heart patient or they had a stroke or something. You kind of would imagine what the thing was, but you didn't actually always know, and you
Uh-huh.
just were there to help. So you just learn to observe and take in as much as you could without knowing. And
Mhm.
there was something about that was also really good because when say, oh, this is for that, this is for
Right.
that. It wasn't a prescription. It was like whatever he saw, you had to think of, well, what is he seeing?
Yeah.
And what does it have? What's the effect that he's doing this adjustment for that thing that he's seeing? So what
Yeah.
is he seeing? And so then you had to start to try to find out what he's seeing, what he's going to do with it, and then how is it going to? What's the outcome? Now sometimes there's a lot of grunting and pushing and pulling that went on, and they'd be like, or screaming sometimes in some of the adjustments. And then so he would do the adjustment and say, then now do that 2 more times or something to that person, and then he'd walk away. Or he said, you'd call me over, strong man, or so they had to bring the weights. I was carrying weights a lot at the beginning, which is fun because then I could see how the weights go and how to place it, where to put the weights on someone, or where to
Yeah.
put the belt on someone, or where to adjust someone So you just watched and watched how to do it and
Mhm.
see where his hands were on the people, how he made those adjustments without knowing why. So so you didn't have an attachment to something like that. You just saw, and you saw over time then why those certain people were getting certain adjustments and other people getting something else. That was like an interesting game for me to play to find out. Okay, let's see how is he going to adjust this person? How's he going
Mhm.
to adjust that person? And what's it for? Sometimes you'd get someone would tell you, oh, that person has this situation, but
Mhm.
often you didn't know. And
Yeah.
then when Geeta came along, Geeta then started making it more clear, and she'd write their name down, what the problem was, and then a sequence. So then you could follow the sequence. But that was later on.
So do you think for Guruji that was purposeful to not say so that we wouldn't, or I was never in the medical classes, but so that the people there wouldn't think, okay, so for hypertension, this is the prescription. It had to really be what you saw, what you were observing with
You
each.
know, I don't know with Guruji how much of it was that planned out. I think that he worked by intuition and observation and kind of improvisation of what is needed to be done at that time. It was more like that's the way he worked.
Yeah.
What he saw, he took care of. If I think that sometimes if someone would ask him a question, then he maybe would get upset because he didn't know the answer until he saw the situation. He can
Yeah.
say, "So, what do you do with this patient?" And it's like, how could you ask a question because he has to see the person, and that same problem on different people, he's going to handle it differently. So, if a woman is older and frail, he's going to be dealing with them who's a heart patient. He's going to deal with a heavy man that's overweight and never done any yoga before, as
Mhm.
opposed to someone who's been doing yoga for years and then they have a heart condition. So he's going to handle them differently. It came from what he saw in that person and how they behaved. Also, how it would change how he, if did they come in afraid, did they come in full of themselves, that would change how he's going to respond, how he's going to work with that person.
Hmm.
I think, and and so even when people come in now, when you say, "Hi, do you have any problem? Anything I need to know about?" And then you're kind of looking at them, and even their situation might not be the main thing, but how are they? Are they afraid of walking to the class, or they think they know everything already, or they've been through all these doctors and they don't know what else? This is the last resort, or this is just a little thing that happened to them and they want to see what yoga is like. It's just they're just trying it out. So all those things then make a difference in how you're going to then what you're going to give them or how you're going to treat them, because and you don't, and those are the ones that they're saying things. Then there's all these people come in that you don't know if they just had a death in the family or if they just came from a being married or so there's all these things that you don't know where people are coming from, especially after the pandemic. Then that really changed the way we interact with people, and people are going through a lot. And now with where we are in this country, I mean, it's a really interesting time, and so there's a lot that goes on with people that you can't just, not everyone's just in this great state that are coming to take class. It's a lot going on. So we have to be more open to different situations going on that we don't know about, that are going on in people's lives. That's probably always been going on, but I think there's a lot going on, a little bit too much going on right now. And so I think that's really great that we have this yoga practice, and we have our here in New York a place that people can go and get away from all that for at least an hour and a half or 2 hours, and feel like they can pull themselves back together if they've been out of sorts with watching the news or taking care of or dealing with all these problems that are going on, and that will continue to go on for a while, I think. So we're lucky to have this practice.
So I want to ask you then, part of the reason why I have this podcast is to preserve the legacy of B.K.S. Iyengar. For the people who will never have had the chance to meet him, the new teachers coming up, and even the students, what advice would you give to the new teachers on how to keep his legacy at the forefront? What do you see as important?
I think it's that thing I was talking about earlier. It's to never stop learning, like keep learning and keep fresh and keep learning about life, and not just the yoga. That you use life and all its facets and mysteries, so that you can have something to go back and forth on. So it's not just technical points to teach, because Guruji gave lots of technical points, but there was also this bigger picture that was always there. But he used the technique as a means to an end, but not an end in itself. The technique was to hold you together, but then the bigger picture had to be there. Now, some of that only comes when you're around those people that have that bigger idea. Then that technique can reinforce that idea. But if I think it's just making sure that you're learning all the time and taking it all in and not getting stuck in just small pieces of it, so the bigger picture shows up, and don't lose the importance of the bigger picture, whatever that is. That there's more than what's tangible and what we see. There's all those other layers to ourselves. We start with the basic tangible things, and that's what interested me at the beginning. Oh, there was things that were tangible that you could get help with, but then it opened up to all these other layers that folded that were more important than because eventually the techniques, you're not going to be able to do all those things. So you have to keep making it connect with the bigger idea of why we're here and what's important. And I think you have to have all those other things in life feeding into it. Otherwise, it gets a little narrow-minded or narrow focused. So you want to have that wide angle lens so that you don't get stuck in trying to hold on to it to keep the legacy going, but not to kill it, not to make it so small and so tight that it stops continuing to blossom and grow. And that's what I think, that's what's so uplifting with Prashant's teaching, because it just keeps unfolding more and more. And Avi's teaching is so simple and light and uplifting. That's also so refreshing, because that's also needed now. I mean, the way Guruji and Geeta taught, that wouldn't really work right now in where we are and in this life. Avi's bringing this fresh new way of looking at things I think it's a perfect thing for this next generation that's coming up and learning. I was just with her in Argentina. It was so simple and so generous and so gracious and uplifting. I just couldn't believe how she could do it all. It blew me away. I mean,
Mhm.
all those Iyengars, they blow me away in all the different ways. I mean, in all different ways, they're amazing at what they're doing, and it's just because they're comfortable in it. They've been living in it, and they're steeped in it. So there's no anxiety about doing it right because it's what's going to come out of them that they've been in it, and so it's theirs. They know it, and so then they can give it. You have to know it before you give it. So if you're trying to hold on to it and trying to remember it and try to do the right thing, I think that's where it can get problematic. Even these assessments that happen, if people know it, then you're just going to do what you know. But if you're trying to remember what you're supposed to do and get it right, then you're in your head in a different way than letting it just come out. Because if you don't know, you don't know it. So and then no memory of it. Like, oh, I'm supposed to say this. It's not going to work. You're supposed to say this, but it's not the right situation to say that, then it's not going to work. So I think you just have to know a lot and then use what you need at the time. So you have to keep knowing a lot, which means you have to keep learning, keep
Yeah.
studying, keep learning. And there's so much. I mean, there's so many aspects to it that you can. There's never going to end. So you can go on all these different directions in it. It's an art, science, and philosophy. It has all those components. So if you're drawn more to one part of it or want to know another part of it, there's enough in it for everybody.
Sometimes for me, it's almost overwhelming.
I think that's why you have to keep it simple. You keep
Yeah.
it simple, and so don't. It is a lot, and because they gave so much and they
Yeah.
give so much, and so you think you have to have it all, but you can't do it all. You have to pick something and do it well, and then you
Yeah.
pick another thing and do it well. So then don't, because I think I have the same thing. Sometimes I think I have no right to be even teaching this. I have no. I mean, and then I go to Prashant's class or even Abhijata in Argentina. I mean, she was teaching a class. She was teaching people behind the stage that had neck problems. She had the level 3 teachers doing the adjustments on those people, and it was just like, why are we making it so complicated? But she was able to do it in a way that was just easy for her. But
Mhm.
I think, oh God, I wouldn't be able to take that on. It's too much. And so then I think, oh, if you compare yourself to them, you can't. It's like, what can I possibly teach? I come back from studying, from Pune or something, and I think, what am I going to say? I don't know what to say the first class. And
Yeah.
then you see what they need, and you start teaching what you see in front of you. But
Yeah.
at first, you think, what can I possibly teach these people? After all the stuff that I learned, you have to digest it and have it assimilated, and then you teach. But I think, oh, so you just have to keep taking it in, and then something's going to come out that's
Mhm.
hopefully helpful. And if people keep coming back, then they're getting something from it. I hope. But it can be done because I don't think I can take on the way they have taken it on because I still have a life. I mean, you have to still live. You have to do laundry and you have to cook and you have to go to the store and you have to deal with listen to all the things that are on the news and so there's a lot. And then you have to practice and you have to and so then how do you get it all how do you continue to take it all in? I think it gets overwhelming. So I think you just have to keep it simple and go step by step. And I think that's the advice that with students and they want to be teachers is just give yourself time. Let it give the time that you need. And there's not one right amount of time. For certain people, they might move faster. Others might take more time. There's no rush.
Mhm.
Prashant talks about about you can't make a teacher. A teacher has to become.
Mhm.
It has to happen. And I think about some of the Geeta and Prashant. I mean, it wasn't until Guruji was way into his 90s that they became teachers in a sense because they were underneath him, and so it's hard to have things grow under a banyan tree. I think that you just have to let it go slowly, and then it will happen when it happens, and you can't rush that. And so there's no rush to be a certified teacher at a certain time because you have to be able to let it happen, and you can teach once you know something well enough, then you can share it. It is overwhelming that there's so much that you might have to know. But then I think I can only teach what I know. I can't teach what I don't know. I mean, I can't. I have to have had an experience of something that I can then, if I haven't experienced it, I can't teach it. I still feel like I'm new. I'm new. I feel like
Me.
I'm still a new kid. I feel like I'm just beginning to teach. And so I think, what was I doing all those other years? What was I teaching? I mean, I think I look and I found out another notebook of just all my sequences that I taught. I look, oh, just it's just names written down, thinking, well, what does that mean? What did I do when I taught those poses? What did I say? Because I just have the list of poses that I taught for like this whole, one whole 6 months. I was writing down everything I taught so I could make sure that I got everything in. I'm looking, that doesn't mean anything. I mean, it's just some, poses.
Yeah, I look back at I've only been to Pune twice, and when I look at those notes, I would write down the sequence, but I didn't really write down what I needed to be writing down, which is what they were saying.
Well, it's really interesting because there was times if I had to remember what the class had, there's very little there because I try to remember what I taught or what they taught, and there wasn't much. Or if I did it with someone else, they could write. They were saying all these things like I don't remember that. Even though I was in the class, the classes I do have notes for is that I would sit there and watch those classes. So
Oh,
those classes, I tried to write down everything. There was a
yeah.
point where I was just writing down the things that were new to me, and I thought, oh no, that's not good because if I don't have those other things, just the thing to stand out, that's not the whole. That's all this base of stuff that's there, and then you pick out something that's I've never heard that before. You write that down, but then that's not going to be balanced because those same things that are over and over and over again, I need to be there. When I did that thing of Geeta, and I read this one sentence, I think we take the thighs back, take the thighs back. But I read that sentence what I had written down. Deeply suck the skin fibers of the front of your thighs to the bone and take the bone back. Well, that's a whole different. First of all, you have to find this. I didn't know I had skin fibers that had to be deeply stuck to the bone.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
it's not just taking your thighs back, but how do you? So it makes you look at yourself differently and understand who you are differently. When I see some of these sentences that I wrote down as much as I could. Now, sometimes I'm writing a sentence and then they were on to another sentence that was really good, so I had to stop that sentence and just keep going because I couldn't write that fast. But there's the notes that now I'm looking at because it took me a while to find those notes.
Mhm.
But they were in a box, and I thought, oh God, I got to get these out and look at them and start using them because
Mhm.
there's certain sentences that change the way you look at it. If it's that, and then there's certain things I would just write. In music, there's a little line with the two dots that means repeat, and so
Yeah.
I could like Prashant would be saying something, and I write it once, and I'd repeat because he said it over and over and over and over again. You know,
Mhm.
and so I look at some of those things that they say over and over again. What is, that means that's a repetition of something that's really important. And then there's other things they just say maybe once and all those things. So I've been looking at my notes in all those different ways of what I wrote down because I was taking a class. I didn't really usually write that down, but the
Mhm.
class that I observed, which I was able to observe a lot because I wasn't taking a lot. I mean, I was taking it every day, but then there was another part of that day I didn't take. So then that's the class I would sit there and write it down
Mhm.
as fast as I could write. And I didn't go to college, so I didn't ever have the ability to quickly know how to take notes very well. So it was another thing I was thinking, I'm going to try to write down everything I can and as fast as I can. And sometimes I didn't even know what words they were saying. So, like what, I missed that word. And so I'd be like, what is that word? What are they saying? And then I finally find out afterwards what that word was. If you didn't get that one word, and so I think about these foreign students because it's hard enough learning it in English and understanding when they're saying, if you miss one word, that's a little bit different pronunciation than we use. And you go, oh, that's what they're saying. So then it makes a whole difference of what you understand.
And I think too, it's not so much we take the notes and we do learn. I mean, from the Iyengars, there's so much to be learned from them. But really, it's to not worry so much about, what was said in this class or I mean, don't you find, and I think Prashant is trying to get this through to us as well, it has to come from your own practice and your own inner experience. And the notes just, they're not gonna do it the same
Well,
way.
that's why I didn't look at. I mean, I took those notes and never looked at them.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
took
yeah.
those notes and never looked at them. But we were looking at those classes for Gita, when I was looking for to find the notes, and I found them, I was like, oh, well now I'm ready to go back and look at them because those are from 1990 in the 90s. And I
Hmm.
want to see, well, what were they saying now? How different is that? How did that change from what they're saying now to what they said then? and some of the things are the same over and over again. And then there's other things that are like, oh, that's a different way of looking at it. Now, I wonder if they would. This is before they were also videotaping or recording the classes.
Yeah.
So they didn't record them then. There was no. So then it's like this was the recording of it in the sense me writing it down, and I just think, oh, what did I write? What did I think that was interesting? What did I was able to write down? And then I sometimes off the side I'll write something more about it. And so those are my own little notes. But basically, I'm just trying to write down what they said, and then take in what they're saying into what am I saying now, and how much of it, most of it's what I'm saying. It's like, I've taken it, I've digested it, and I've used it. So it's interesting to go back and look at those notes, not to say that what's right or what's wrong, but I'm saying those things. It's just in a little maybe different way, but I'm basically getting that same idea across. And then if there's not, I'm thinking that, of course, that's where I got my teaching from. I mean, it's from those classes I listened to, that I took. That's what I took in. That's what I remember. That's what's important to me. That's what's important to give back out. And so I think it is that, you've digested it, simulated it, and then see what comes out. It comes from your experience of what they taught you, what's important, and then how you put it into your practice, and then how to come out to teach. But they say they have so much that it's like, you can't. But when you first come back, you think, what? I don't know I don't have anything to say, because it's just like there was so much that came in, and there's no way that I can't give that to my students. But then I think, well, really, what I'm doing is I'm preparing students to go to Pune. So if I can get them a little bit accustomed to the idea, so that when they get there, they have some knowledge of of the names of poses, and how to do them.
Well, James, this has been really great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good to talk to you.
Thank you for tuning in to On the Light. Today, I want to end by reading a passage from the end of the preface of Light on Life. 50 years ago, I came to the West to shed light on yoga. Now, through this book, I am presenting half a century of my experience in order to shed light on life. The popularity of yoga and my part in spreading its teaching are a great source of satisfaction to me. But I do not want yoga's widespread popularity to eclipse the depth of what it has to give the practitioner. 50 years after my first trip west, and after so much devoted yoga practice by so many, I now wish to share with you the whole of the yoga journey. It is my profound hope that my end can be your beginning. If you have been enjoying Light on Life and would like to support the podcast, consider making a small monthly donation. Your support helps cover production costs and allows me to continue sharing meaningful conversations like this one. Every contribution, no matter the size, makes a difference, and I'm truly grateful for your support. You can find the donation link in the show notes. Thank you for listening. Namaskar.